We're going to rewatch with Re-Vamped. Want to come? It is better than destroying the world. The sacrifice is one who abides when you are the star of the show. Well, you're not the star of the headliner. No. The draw. No. The main attraction. Sire Rebecca, I'm excited that we are back. Why don't we talk behind the scenes?
I think that sounds great.
What's that then? It's sharing stuff that listeners don't know, like what happened during shooting. Well, why don't you just say that, minion Juliet? I'll give you notes later. No notes. Okay then. I'll just kill you. Notes it is. Do you want to hear some behind-the-scenes info?
Yes, I do.
In acting, there is something called substitution, and you can do this with people. Let's say that you need to create a chemistry with an actor that you have just met on set. For instance, the given circumstances are that you've been married for 20 years, but in real life, you've just said hello, and you're going to be shooting in a half an hour, and you have no real rehearsal time. You may substitute your own life partner. You'll see their eyes, their hands, their body, so that you're liberated to freely behave without being self-conscious. A couple who's been married for 20 years behaves very differently than people who have known each other for less than an hour. If you're in a scene where, say, you're cooking together, assuming that you're in a happy marriage, you would touch the other actor when reaching around them for a saucepan. If the scene calls for an unhappy union, you could substitute someone who you dislike. There are all kinds of other ways to fill in elements besides substitution, but I'm talking about it because in Puppet Show, Sarah did a wonderful job of this. Even though Sid's dialogue was read, she still had to imbue an inanimate object and make the audience believe it. Make her relationship with Sid believable and real, and she did such a brilliant job of this. I truly believe the rapport that she creates. I believe the conversations, and I get how she feels about Sid. There's a funny story about Sarah that Jerry Baker told me. Jerry was the hair department head on Buffy Season 1 and Season 2. She was also the department head on Ant-Man and the Wasp, Scarlett Johansson's personal on Captain America the Winter Soldier, and many, many other projects. Before Buffy had aired yet, Sarah went to Knott's Scary Farm, where people that are donned in monster makeup and costumes jump out to scare people. You know, a horror amusement park. This guy in full regalia jumped out, and she instinctively kicked him. She had a gut reaction because of working on the show. She got into trouble, and she tried to explain that she was shooting the show where she had to slay vampires and demons, and that her response had been reflexive. But since the show wasn't on the air yet, they didn't care, and they threw her out of the park. Isn't that crazy?
I get to see. No, seriously, it's not you. I'm just trained this way right now.
I know. I thought it was so great. It cracked me up. So let's go to the recap.
Synopsis. A brief summary or a general survey. Don't quote me, but I just love to compile, collate, posit, and then conclude. I'm summary gal. Yup, that's me.
Drusilla, do you want to give the synopsis? This poor demon tries really hard to get his due. All he needs is a heart and a brain, but the meddlesome cheerleader thwarts him. Rebecca, why don't you give us the synopsis?
I'll see what I can do. So, a school talent show seems to be the perfect hunting ground. Students are murdered and having their organs harvested, and all signs are pointing to a very unlikely killer in the form of a ventriloquist dummy.
At the top of the episode, Chrissy Carlson plays the dancer Emily backstage. This opening reminds me of the opening of A Touch of Evil. Have you ever seen A Touch of Evil? The Orson Welles 19... Yeah, the whole way, the camera movement, the use of the sound, the way that it sort of tracks through everybody. We see all of the people auditioning, and Giles is horrified by Cordelia's singing. I think Cordelia should have sung Run and Catch. Run and catch. Run and catch. So the auditorium is where I did panels at HowlmouthCon and will again this year in June, and it looks exactly the same as it did then. It's verbatim the same. Giles describes Principal Snyder as, quote, our new Führer, Mr. Snyder. And Buffy calls it a talentless show. I love that. We meet the new principal, played by Armin Shimmerman. Armin told me that he was blown away by how good all of the actors were. He also said that his first scene distills the essence of his character, his attitude towards them. Snyder describes Flutie, his predecessor, as touchy-feely, and Armin just has such masterful comic timing. Buffy, Xander, and Willow say, watch, mock, laugh. And then with Snyder, when he tells them they have to be part of the talent show, they talk in single words again with, what? No, please. Morgan Shea is played by Rich Werner. To me, he looks a little bit like Eric Menendez. Did you get that?
Oh, God. Yeah. I didn't think about it until now. Thank you for that image.
We meet him and his dummy Sid, who was voiced by Tom Weiner. Tom also did Buffy the Vampire Slayer Chaos Bleeds video game, had lots of voiceover credits since the late 1970s, including Power Rangers, and he just passed away at 77 in 2024. Sid reminds me of Andrew Dice Clay or a Las Vegas kind of comedian. He really grew on me in this watch through. Didn't you just want to pinch his cheeks? Oh, Sid. I wanted to stab his eyes out.
He gave a Rat Pack performance in this role. I have never been a huge fan of ventriloquist dummies, but growing up, I used to collect porcelain dolls, and I even have one that my godfather gave me that the dress is older than the doll, and the doll has human teeth and hair.
No.
Yeah, she stays locked in a cabinet at the other end of the house.
Ooh.
But one night, the moon was kind of shining through my bedroom window, and it lit up the faces of all the dolls that I had on this shelf. And I spent the entire night talking to them, reminding them how I took good care of them and I dusted them and, treated them well. And then in the morning, I carefully, lovingly wrapped each one up and put it in a large Tupperware bin that I then duct taped all around, and it is still up in the attic now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I figured you can't be too safe. So
it sounds like a horror movie waiting to happen with the dolls in the attic.
It is. Why did you have to say that now? Because I get to sleep here.
Well, speaking of horror movies, when we see Emily, Chrissy Carlson, in the girls' locker room and she's alone, it's really shot in a scary horror type way with the angles and the horror sound effects. She's very much a Buffy type. And when we get back to the stage, did you notice that the stage features a disco ball?
Yes, I did.
So do you know the origin of the disco ball?
No, I do not.
The first recorded mention of a disco ball, or mirror ball, was in 1897 at a party held by an electricians' union in Massachusetts. However, the first patent for a disco ball was filed in 1917 by Louis Bernard Woest, who called it the myriad reflector. A bit wordy, that name. Not as catchy as disco ball. And they were first used in nightclubs in the 1920s. An early example can be seen in the nightclub sequence of a German silent film from 1927. They were revived in the 1940s by Omega National Products, a furniture manufacturer that specialized in flexible mirrored sheets. Omega became the leading manufacturer of disco balls in the 1970s. Disco balls became a standard feature in discos from the 1960s to the 1980s.
Well, I think it's always interesting to really find out the root of a lot of these things that we kind of take for granted now. And learning that the disco ball has such a rich history is really surprising.
The casting call for all of the acts must have been so much fun. Willow says that she plays piano, but not in front of people. Do you have something that you do that people might not know about you?
Well, in another life, I used to be a singer and I performed at school and in theaters, and I was even a singing waitress for a little while. I did that all in front of people, but the other very odd talent that nobody knows about was that I used to compete in rodeos, and my area was barrel racing.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I've known you this long and I didn't know either of those things. And okay, I have to ask, what is barrel racing?
So it's like an obstacle course with barrels, and you have to follow the course on horse as fast as possible, and usually picking up something from one barrel and being able to drop it into another at the end of the course. And you have to do it in the least amount of time. So there were a lot of times where your leg is scraping up against the barrel as you're turning a corner, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How long did you do that for?
I did it for, unfortunately, not too long. It was only like 4 years. I was riding before and after, but only competed for a short time.
And do you have trophies? Did you win?
They're up in the attic with the dolls.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like a spell. Some sort of spell is going to happen or something. Wow, that's great. Mine's so much more boring. I like to bake, so I bake a lot, and Dev is vegan, so a lot of vegan goodies and desserts, but nothing like barrel racing.
I don't know. Baking is pretty difficult. I am not a baker. I can cook, but baking requires so much more skill and measurements. And so, yeah, I'm impressed by the baking, especially vegan baking.
Now, if I could bake while barrel racing, we'd really have something.
Maybe the obstacle can be grabbing the ingredients as you go around and then hopping off the horse and starting to bake at the end. We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. We've got something big here. I can feel it. So, dolls and dummies have their own subset in the horror genre. I was thinking about all the projects that I could come up with. Magic with Anthony Hopkins, Chucky, Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black, Megan, Annabelle, Puppet Master, the Saw franchise, Unholy 3 with Lon Chaney, Dead Silence with James Garner, Marley Matlin, and Scott Speedman, Devil Dolls, which is the Chris Wheel film we discussed with Chris when we had him on. Originally, it was called Worry Dolls. Did you have any to add to that?
No, I think you covered just about all the ones that I can think of.
Yeah, I really subscribe to the notion that clowns, dummies, and dolls are creepy, and your story didn't assuage me of this at all.
I had an uncle who collected clown art.
Oh.
Uncle Carmine had clown velvet paintings and a tall clown papier-mâché figurine that you had to go past in the staircase. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of the clown especially.
No, that sounds like a nightmare, having to go by it all the time.
It was the entrance into the house, so there was no way around it.
Welcome, everyone.
Who needs a bodyguard when you have a clown sculpture?
Exactly. Maybe you don't even need a burglar alarm. You just got the scary clown who'll keep everybody away. Principal Snyder talks about the kids needing discipline. He lists Sunnydale High's reputation: suicide, missing persons, spontaneous cheerleader combustion. I love that. And he says you got to keep an eye on the bad element. Ew, I like that. Corporal punishment is a good game. Someone, Minion Juliet, needs a right spanking. I've got a good game, Drew. Let's see how long you can be quiet. I prefer spanking. This episode is directed by Ellen S. Pressman. It is one of 2 Buffy episodes that she directed. The other one was Inca Mummy Girl in season 2. She also directed 10 episodes of Party of 5, among many other things. When Emily is found dead with her heart removed, there's more detective work by the whole Scooby gang in this episode than usual. It's very Scooby Dru. What? No, Scooby Dru. Yeah. What? Not Drew. Do. Do what? Oh, never mind. There's a lot more investigating, which involves the whole group. Buffy interviews, Giles interviews, Willow interviews, Xander interviews. And we see Morgan has these headaches. He grabbed his head right from the top of the show, and they seem to be getting worse. And Sid seems to be getting more aggressive. I think we have a primal fear of inanimate objects becoming alive or becoming possessed, especially when they're made in our likeness, like the clown.
Yeah.
Scary. Do you know who the first ventriloquists were?
No.
Alexander of Abonoticus in 150 AD captivated audiences with a talking serpent with a human head. This was an early use of a dummy to focus attention on a misplaced voice. Fred Russell and Coster Joe in the 1880s, these performers created the conventional double act of the ventriloquist and the cheeky dummy. Fred Russell is considered the father of modern ventriloquism. Then there was Paul Winchell. Around 1938, Winchell created the first of his many Jerry puppets. The original Jerry was made of wood and had a detachable head. Winchell and his puppets were popular from the 1930s through the 1980s. So he had a really long go with that.
That is impressive.
And you uncovered something I really want to hear more about.
Yeah, I came across the story of Mr. Fritz. So there's a man named Michael Diamond, and he has some of the rarest sideshow exhibits and apparatus in the UK. Mr. Fritz is now owned by Mr. Diamond. He was originally a ventriloquist dummy who was used to entertain Allied POWs during World War II at Stalag 11B between 1943 and 1945 in Poland. The first American prisoners arrived there in 1943. Private Billy Booth, who was a children's entertainer and puppeteer before the war, made Mr. Fritz with German newspapers stoked in potato starch, painted him with smudge pots of pink gloss that a Polish farmer had given to him. And for almost 18 months, he entertained the prisoners as well as a lot of the guards, doing funny jokes and songs. And then he was killed in January of 1945, 2 weeks before the camp was liberated.
Oh.
So Private Billy Booth, as well as 9 other POWs, were shot that day. But when the camp was finally liberated on the 28th of January, 1945, Mr. Fritz was taken back to the U.S. by a fellow prisoner and given to his family as a reminder of their son's fortitude and ability to raise the morale in the harshest of conditions.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a beautiful story. The creepy side is that since that time, the doll's been haunted. And there are videos online where you can see the case that only his head remains. So the case where his head is will randomly open. The mouth will move. The head will turn. It is truly spooky. So I think it really speaks to this episode as to how people can possibly become when there's so much emotion tied to it in the first place.
Yeah, that's wild. It's such a heartfelt story, and then it gets really scary, too.
Yeah, that would be an interesting movie.
Yeah, you wish that Fritz had been a demon hunter, so he could have saved Billy's life, and they could have come home together. And it's kind of wild also that the dummy's name was Fritz, considering the last episode, we had a Fritz in that episode as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've come full circle already.
The shot at the locker with Buffy and Principal Snyder is so cool. He plays the regimented, militant, deeply miserable, vindictive administrator to a T. It's a very different vibe to Principal Flutie. Both Ken and Armin play their principals with a great mix of authority and humor, but in very, very different ways. Sid discusses wanting to be free with Morgan. It's similar to Moloch, more M's. Yes, Drew. Yes, thank you for that. It's interesting how episodes in the series in a row or nearby often revisit the same themes and ideas. In iRobot, a demon is being liberated and wants to be free, so it's 2 episodes in a row. It's really creepy when Sid spies on Buffy. There are many sequences throughout the series where Buffy is sleeping. It's a show about nightmares, things that go bump in the night, so that makes a lot of sense. Did you notice what t-shirt Buffy was wearing in the sequence when Sid is spying on her?
I didn't. I remember it was a tank top, but I was honestly really just looking at her hair in that scene.
It's Rosie the Riveter, which is a perfect representation of female power and ability in the face of adversity, which is Buffy. Since the episode centers around a talent show, do you think that the message of this one is that student talent shows are terrifying?
I know that some of them that I sat through definitely felt that way.
Yeah, that's the deep theme of it. Morgan portrays the character a bit like a junkie. He doesn't look well, and it's a little bit like when Dave was becoming more and more junkie-like in the last episode. We learn from Giles that there's a brotherhood of 7 demons that every 7 years need a brain and a heart to maintain their human form. It's like the dark Wizard of Oz. If I only had a brain, if I only had a heart. Scary version, right? Xander says red rum. Do you know what that's a reference to?
I do. It's from The Shining.
It sure is. When Buffy goes to the dressing room looking for Morgan, she has a run-in with Principal Snyder instead, and there's such great horror lighting on Snyder. Michael Gershman, the cinematographer, told me that when he lit Armin's ears, he put a red light behind them. It was devilish, but also a bit silly and absurd. The lighting illustrates a lot of the levels and shades that Armin brings to the character. Armin and I never overlapped on an episode. We met later at the first convention I ever went to. It was Sean Harry's Star Fury event in Blackpool. Armin had met a friend of mine at an audition, and they'd been in the waiting room together, and they started talking about Buffy, and when Armin learned that we were friends, he went on and on about my work. He was just so sweet and complimentary, and I had always wanted to repay the compliment. So when we met backstage, I got the chance to do that. But I actually have a funny story about that event. A bunch of us were gathered backstage. Sean tells us that we have to go out one at a time and talk to the audience. There were over 4,000 people there, and at that time, I had never done anything like that. As me, I was comfortable playing a character in front of large audiences, on stage, on set, but not being myself ad-libbing in front of a large audience. So I started freaking out backstage. I was saying, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. What happens if I don't do this? Oh my God. And all the while, Amy Acker goes up on stage, does great, gets huge applause. Alexis goes up on stage, does great, gets huge applause. I'm backstage, still saying, I can't do this. I have no idea what to say. I don't know what to do. I cannot do this. I cannot do this. Can I run? What do I do? What do I do? All of a sudden, my name is called. And before I know what I'm doing, I'm waltzing on stage. I take the mic and I say, "Hello, Blackpool. Are you having fun?" And I span the audience with the mic for a cheer. And then I say, "I can't hear you." And I span the audience with the mic again to rising cheers. And then I say, how do you really feel about us being here? And then I swipe the mic and it goes thunderous, like the applause goes huge. And so I walk off stage and all of the cast starts mimicking me. Oh my God, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't have it in me. I'm not good at this. And I still, to this day, have never let that down.
Sounds like something just took over and you went with it.
I just went with it. I was like, what am I going to, I got to do it. I just have to. Rebecca, you and I talked about our love of books and bookshelves on our iRobot episode. When Willow reads a passage in the library, did you notice what one of the prominent books on the shelf next to Giles is?
No, I didn't.
Ooh, it's Jacqueline Suzanne's 1966 Valley of the Dolls.
Of the dolls.
So
That's
apropos.
perfect.
Exactly. I love those kind of Easter eggs with props and set design. In Ed Wood, I thought of my character as Ava Gardner gone awry. So I asked for a 1950s Starlet magazine with Ava Gardner on the cover for one scene. And because my character didn't drink liquids, I turned the glass upside down in the bar scene. And those kind of details are peppered all throughout all of the seasons of Buffy.
I was noticing in the dressing room the demon sticker on the dressing room exit door.
Me too. Exactly. That was another one. It's so perfect.
The little touches that give you so much extra information.
And that whole sequence when we are in the dressing room again, it's very horror-esque with sound effects, and it's quite fitting because Morgan is dead and his brain is gone, and it's a really taut section of the episode. This episode does what Buffy often does so well. It subverts expectations, the bait and switch. We learn that there was a curse, that Sid is not the demon, that he's a demon hunter, and we're now in a whodunit. Sid becomes Basil exposition a la Austin Powers here, and Giles even says that it's a welcome change for someone else to explain the exposition. That made me laugh so hard. It was so funny. And Sid not only has the demon curse exposition, but he explains the power circle to Giles because Sid's very showbiz. One of the themes is manipulation and control of others. In this case, the puppet master is not the manipulator and neither is the puppet. One of my favorite scenes from Puppet Show is the scene with To Be Continued. And now we're going to reveal our next contenders for the Battle of the Uber Buffy fans, the ultimate trivia contest. Drum roll, please.
It's the showdown between two Kristas. Two Kristas enter the ring. One leaves victorious. Which Krista will emerge?
My name is Krista Laro. I'm from the beautiful state of Connecticut, and I've seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer all the way through at least 20 times.
My name is Krista. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Long Island, New York. I probably watched Buffy a solid 40 times through. I've taken a college course on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I wrote my 60-page senior thesis on humanism in Buffy the Vampire Slayer while focusing on our beloved Anya.
The demand has been overwhelming. We only have a few slots left. So if you want to be considered as a contender, email revampedpod@gmail.com with your name, where you're based, and where you weigh in with your number of Buffy watch-throughs.
Let's get ready to Buffy!
But before you go, stay tuned for one of Drusilla's vampire vignettes.
The Columbia Network takes pride in presenting Orson Welles in the first production of a unique new series by the Mercury Theater on the Air.
Orson Welles, take one. Yes. Good evening. Welcome to Mercury Theater. Hello, young lady. Yes. Please tell me your name.
Drusilla,
And whom, pray tell, is that?
Mr. Caligula.
Interesting name for a dummy.
I prefer Dolly.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Caligula is my dolly.
All right. And you are a ventriloquist? On the radio? Yes. Not really the best act for the radio.
Why have not?
Because radio is audio, and so no one can tell if your lips are... Oh, never mind.
You talk in riddles.
Kettle. Pot.
Hello, Mercury listeners.
Oh, you've started.
I think this man will be called the Shadow. Oh, I like that. And I think he should do a radio play about vampires invading the planet.
Yes. Not a bad idea. But I think it would work better with Martians. Yes. Oh, yes.
Tonight's production by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater was the first in which this brilliant group will bring to life a series of great narratives.
Revamped Ease, please correspond with me on Twitter at Juliet Landau or on Instagram at Juliet_Landau and on the Fans of Juliet Landau Facebook group or Juliet Landau official Facebook page. And we will see you next week when we do it again. Until next time, rewatch, revamp, reinvent, and be remarkable you.